In today's video, we are going to talk about how to paint white objects realistically in watercolor. On my table, I have toilet paper drawn and taped on my arches, 140-pound cold press paper. And you're probably thinking to yourself, why are we doing toilet paper for our white objects? And actually, this was something I did in college 15 years ago now when I was in my classes. They actually wanted us to do toilet paper was one whole project that we had to do a bunch of, and then hard-boiled eggs, because usually people have both of those objects at home and you can take pictures of them and do fun stuff with them and change the angle, and it's just easy to get your hands on these white objects. And actually, the other reason why I think they're great to do, this wasn't what they said in college, but when you're doing an object that is something you see every day and your mind correlates it with like white, but it's also boring at the same time, like a roll of toilet paper, I think it takes out the part of your brain that then allows you to be able to just focus on the shadows, which is really how you paint a white object, is you think about where are my dark values, because if this truly was a white object, we wouldn't add any paint on our paper and it would just be the white of our paper. But we know if that was the case, then it wouldn't look realistic. It wouldn't have form to it. It wouldn't look three-dimensional. It would look flat because there's only one value, which is just the white of our paper. So we know that we have to add values onto this. Granted, they're gonna be light in value because we're dealing with a quote unquote white object, but they're still gonna have values on them because we have to create form and dimension by adding those values. So let's dive in. I have my round 8 brush, and this is the Creative Mark Ebony Splendor that I'm using. And then other than that, cup of water, got my paints out. Let's dive in with a white object. This is the only time that I'm like pretty particular about using a kneaded eraser to lightly erase, because we're dealing with such light values. I don't really want to see those pencil lines. When I'm dealing with darker values, I don't care about the pencil lines. All right, now that I got that fully, well, not fully erased, but like 80% erased, I'm gonna come in with my lightest value first. And again, right now, the way my light is hitting this paper towel roll, it's coming from this direction. And so this is gonna be kind of where the lighter parts are, and a little bit over here as well. There's gonna be somewhat of a shadow right here because that roll is kind of hanging over. It's creating a little shadow right here. So these are kind of the two spots that I need that are gonna be like the lightest of value, but they still have warmth to it because light is hitting it. So it's still not white because your sunlight has like yellow in it. When you look at snow on the ground, you'll see that the snow doesn't look white either. It has like a tinge of yellow to it because of the sun hitting it. So we're gonna do just a little bit of lemon yellow. That's way too much, so I gotta add a lot of water into that. And also I'm just gonna do a little bit of Naples yellow. Now, again, this is way too dark in value. This needs to be super, super light. So a lot of water. All of this that we're painting today is gonna have a lot of water because we're dealing with a white object. The value is gonna be really light. So I'm gonna just kind of put this over to the side so you can see how light it is on my paper. So pretty light. And now I'm gonna come in, and it doesn't matter where you put this on the object, like if you get it in the other parts, because those are gonna be darker in value. I'm even gonna probably take some water and just even pull some of that. The funny thing too right now is this looks dark compared to the white of our paper, but when you add a background behind this, which we'll do towards the end, you're gonna see how it actually is really still light in value, even though right now it looks dark. And that's just because color too is all relative to what it's near and around. And so right now, because we're dealing with the white of our paper, this looks somewhat dark, but it's really gonna end up looking almost white at the ends. And you'll see what I mean. So now that I got that very first light value in, I'm going to come in and just dry my paper. Okay, once that is dry, I can come in with my next darkest value, and I'm gonna mix up a gray. I like using a gray that is kind of a mixture of ultramarine blue with some alizarin crimson. Too much alizarin crimson. So I try and do those like 50-50. And then I add in some cad orange. That kind of takes it down. Still have too much alizarin crimson, so I'm gonna add more ultramarine blue. That's looking better. Now, this is really dark in value. So again, add a lot of water to it. Tap some of that off on the paper towel. Come and check it on your paper. We don't want this to be too dark. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna come in and right now I'm gonna focus on my shadow areas. So I'm gonna come on this side of my paper towel roll. And then there's a little sliver right here of like where the light is hitting. So we kind of come to this. So when I pull this right here out, leave a little bit of a sliver of that yellow underneath. Because now I'm going to kind of pull this across. And now I'm going to rinse out my brush, kind of dab it, and then kind of start to pull this up. Again, I'm going to rinse and keep kind of merging this into that first value we put down. I'm going to use the same mixture and kind of have a little bit of a tiny spot right there of a highlight, and then I'm going to kind of keep bringing this out. I'm going to rinse my brush and then just kind of soften that and pull that out. So we kind of dealt with the darker values that are on the object. So that's starting to give our paper towel roll some form. Then we also have to deal with the shadows that the object is creating on the ground, and that's also going to help give this object a lot more life to it and make it look more realistic, because once you add the cast shadow, then it looks like it's not just floating in space. So we're going to dry this real quick. And before I do that cast shadow, I'm going to do the cardboard inside. So I'm going to grab some ultramarine blue, cad orange, cad red, a little bit of lemon yellow in there. And then I'm going to paint that in there. This will just be the first layer. It's going to be, there's going to be some darker values in there, which maybe I'll just do it right now while it's all wet. Kind of lifting a little off to that left side. And then what I'm going to do is grab some of my navy, a little bit of cad red, a little cad orange in there too. I'm going to kind of just darken over here. Because that's wet right now, it's just kind of naturally spreading. So I'm going to rinse out my brush. And then I'm just gonna come and kind of lift as it got closer over there to make sure I keep that nice highlight over there. Not really highlight, it's just a lighter area. Okay, now while that is drying, we can come in and work into the shadow on the ground, our cast shadow. So I'm going to come back into this mixture we had, and it's going to be kind of being pulled under. And then this has a little bit of a fold in it, and so the shadow kind of goes in a little bit deeper, and then it's going to come under. And then we're going to follow along the edging. And then even right here, that's going to have a really light, thin, not light, but just a thin shadow underneath the where that paper is hitting the table. So what I'm going to do now is dry this, then we can kind of look at our values, and we're also going to put a value in the background as well to kind of help just let this be kind of popped out more from the white of the paper, which you're going to see that's going to make a huge difference as well. Okay, while this is dry too, I'm going to get that inside just slightly darker right here. Rinse out my brush, and then I'm going to kind of just soften that in there. Okay, now that is done, I'm going to put in the background. Actually, I'm just gonna. All right, I had to fix that one spot. Now I'm gonna put in the background. I'm just gonna use indigo. It's just a nice dark value. You could use ivory black, you can mix up your own, but just something dark to kind of put back behind our toilet paper roll. Might even mix a little bit of neutral tint into here just to get it really nice and dark. So I'm putting this dark value from our background next to our other two color swatches that we had so that you can see, the minute we started putting that dark background against the paper towel roll that we painted, that pale yellow almost really does look the white of the paper. Now I'm going to dry this real quick, come in and do one final shadow area, kind of some darker darks where that cast shadow is, and then if we need it anywhere else. But you could see just with doing those two values on the paper towel roll where we had the pale yellow and then that light kind of purpley shadow color really starts to give that dimension, and you can keep it really simplistic like that when you paint a white object. Just focus on where the white object is, the light source is hitting, it's gonna have usually some warmth to it. And then usually where the shadow is, it's going to be a little bit on the cooler side. I did my shadow a little bit warmer with that purpley, but you could go cooler with it, more gray. There's obviously a lot of options when it comes to the actual color of your shadow. So I'm gonna dry this real quick. And yeah, I feel like my shadows could be on the actual object slightly darker, especially seeing now the background with what's happening. So I'm gonna kind of come into that color I had mixed up, maybe add a little more ultramarine blue into it. A little more alizarin crimson. I'm setting it off to the side because I usually grab too much alizarin crimson. Maybe just a touch of cad orange. Again, I'm going to set it off to the side so I don't get too much in there. Add some more water in there so it's not too dark in value. I'm going to kind of come put this value and see how it compares to my other ones. Okay, so that's pretty good. It's slightly darker than this one, pretty similar. And so I'm going to come in and add that right underneath the base. And even just along the edging there. In a few spots. And then I'm going to just soften that in, just a little bit of a damp brush. Now I'm going to clean out my brush. Okay, that looks better for that shadow. I think I'm also going to even go a little bit darker too, right here. And even right here. Rinse my brush and then just kind of soften those values in. So I just kind of have a damp brush I'm coming in. And then I'm kind of pulling and lifting that off so it's not too dark. The hardest thing is when you're dealing with a white object is to keep those values, for the most part, pretty light. And then even right here, I'm going to darken slightly. Just use a little bit of water to kind of blend that in. And then also I'm going to kind of darken over here, I think, too, a little bit more. Okay, that looks better. All right, I'm going to give this a quick blow dry, and I think I'm going to call this one done. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to darken this slightly. I still feel like that didn't get as dark as what I wanted it to. So I'm just going to mix up a really nice dark brown fast. All right, I think that is better. I just felt like that wasn't dark enough. And again, all of this stuff always comes down to your values and checking those and seeing where they're at. Because now, since that got a little bit darker, that also changes the rest of the values. So anytime you're working on a painting and you change one value without even changing the other values, it's automatically going to, since color is relative to what it's next and the values are relative to what it's next. So I think that helped kind of make these values even lighter by making that so dark. And so I think it ended up adding to this value not looking too dark. And even at the end of the day, when you are painting white objects, while you're painting them, you think your value is too dark. But if we look at this picture, I have a bunch of different ones that I've taken with toilet paper, you can see my black and white imagery, and the shadows on them are actually not that light. Like they're like a mid to light value on there. So you got to be careful when you're dealing with a white object because it's deceiving, as is everything in art. So I hope you guys enjoyed painting this one with me. Again, another great object to practice with that is white is eggs, and doing a bunch of studies with those. And white objects are so great to study because at the end of the day, you kind of start really focusing on and on the shadows and then where the light's hitting to create that form of the object. And I love doing so many of these studies. So take your toilet paper rolls out, grab some hard-boiled eggs, and do a bunch of these studies. You can do the background or not do the background. It's kind of personal preference, but kind of just zeroing in on putting in those shadows in a more light to mid value, focusing on where the light is hitting on a white object usually does have some value to it, like we did on this toilet paper roll with that really pale yellow, where it's like you barely can see it when it's next to the white of the paper, but when we put the background on, it kind of makes it pop out even a little bit more. These objects are so fun to paint. If you're wanting more content and how to paint in watercolor, if you're just starting out, I have my Watercolor 101 course. It has over 10 hours of lessons. We talk about white objects as well in there. We actually do a fried egg, which is kind of fun. We talk about the shadows and all that kind of stuff. But I always appreciate your liking and subscribing to my videos. It helps a lot and goes a long way. So thank you for all the wonderful comments. And I will see you guys in the next video.